A plane flying from LA to DC, if it points its nose, I think 1 foot to the left, it ends up in New York City. So this small little change, but over a long course of time, has a huge impact. And that's why culture is so important, because culture really helps you ensure that all the decisions are keeping you on course. Often we are focused on an objective, a goal, or getting somewhere. It is so important to take time to continue to nourish connections that you have. Being the third's awesome. I didn't get much of a choice in it, but it held me to a higher standard. I knew that because of my grandfather and because of my dad that I had to achieve.
Brandon Coleman has spent his career turning around iconic brands. From the boardrooms of TGI Fridays, Dave & Buster's, and Del Frisco's, to the cafes of Cotton Patch, he has built a reputation for one thing: listening. As a third-generation leader, the grandson of a legendary Texas high school basketball coach, and the son of an ad agency founder, Brandon learned early that excellence is earned, not inherited. Today, as CEO of Cotton Patch Café, he has done what most said couldn't be done: lowered prices, raised wages, grew portions, and 12x'd EBITDA in the process.
It's 12x EBITDA with increased portion sizes, lower prices, and more benefits for team members and higher pay. We raise pay as well. So all of that, and yet we're still able to produce such incredible financial returns, which just shows that if you take a balanced approach, you really can create value for your stakeholders. So now, we've got 12x in EBITDA, and we're on this gravy-fueled rocket ship.
What are some of those success factors that have helped that massive movement that you've had in the last 2 years?
An obsession really with creating value for all stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, guests, the team, and the shareholders, we should always be building value. And that's why the first thing I jump to when you ask, what are some of the specifics that we put in place to improve Cotton Patch and have these results just completely turn around? It's listening. It's having empathy. Whether it's your team member giving you feedback, whether it's the guest giving you feedback. I've actually got a good story that goes along with that. I actually got kicked in the mouth. Metaphorically, of course. I had come out of New York at McCann Erickson to come lead marketing for Johnny Carino's. We came up with this great campaign called the Italian Road Trip. But I go into the restaurant and I sit down for lunch. And I was like, "Oh, excuse me, miss, I think I'd like to order this Italian Road Trip." And she goes,
"Oh no." Great turnarounds don't just happen by bold moves. They happen when CEOs listen to the small signals to make big changes. Our next guest is Brandon Coleman III, and he is the CEO of Cotton Patch. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, and as I was looking at, we've known each other for quite a while, but we're going to dig into the business results because they are impressive with the time you've been at Cotton Patch, and we'll get to that. But I want to start with something that I saw that just struck me about how you focus so much on the time that you can't get the time back, and how you manage your time is so critical to your success. So I want to hear your thoughts on that, but I want to understand, where did that come from, that philosophy?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think we all know time is a finite resource, right? I was reading Atomic Habits, if you've read that, great book. And it was talking about how a plane flying from LA to DC, if it points its nose, I think 1 foot to the left, it ends up in New York City. So this small little change, but over a long course of time, has a huge impact. And that really struck me, not only as the opportunity to make a big impact, but also the things that waste our time, or the things that we spend time doing that aren't accretive to our bigger vision or our bigger mission, our purpose. And so it became really important to me, that I make sure that I'm maximizing my time and that I'm using it towards something that furthers my values and something that I believe in.
That's incredible. And I have heard that story about just that little bit, 1 foot can change a difference. A drift. And that's important. And that's in business today with so many bankruptcies and bad business results. Those small changes make a big difference.
And that's why culture is so important, because culture really helps you ensure that all the decisions are keeping you on course, right? It's not one necessarily strategic decision a lot of times. It's a cultural drift.
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of little decisions that just take you way off course.
Well, and that I always say it's then that gap is way like this, and then it's hard. It's hard to bring it back. It's hard to bring it back together.
Absolutely.
I have to ask a question though. The atomic habits. There's lots of little things, and I've talked to several other CEOs, and they have these interesting habits. Is there something? I'll just tell you. So when I talked to Brett Schulman from Kava, he was like adamant, make your bed every day. Like that's one of his habits. Do you have a fun habit like that?
So I've watched that video of the Marine who says like, wake up, make your bed. And man, I wish I was that guy. Brett's a better operator than I am apparently. But no, that's, yeah, my bed's not always made.
That's too yeah.
But you know, I have a pretty set routine. I do believe in routine. I do believe in kind of scheduling for success. Because if you don't take the time to set those things that are important to you and really get them in the schedule, whether it be, you know, checking metrics daily or working out every day or, making sure you schedule time with your team to check in with one-on-ones. If you don't schedule the things that are important, it's very easy to let them slip. And I think they're getting back to that drift. And so, making the bed, I think it's symbolic for, you know, even if everything goes wrong that day, you come home to a made bed. And I wish I was better at that. Actually, I feel like I've given away something about myself. My kryptonite is not making my bed.
Well, that's okay though. But I think that having that discipline and having that schedule, I mean, that's how you get things done that you need to get done. I will say I married somebody that is very much make your bed every day. So our bed every day is made. But I want to ask, is there something that you wish that you could schedule more time in? Because everybody's schedule is so jammed. If your schedule is like mine, it's like back to back to back. And is there something that you wish like, wow, that you either protect very much or just you wish you could carve another hour out of the day?
Oh man, I always look for more time, you know, and I think that there's a lot of things that are important to me that I wish I had more time for. I love exercise. Obviously I love spending time with my family. If I could get extra time there, that's great. But I think as far as business goes, I would say more connection with people. It often we are focused on an objective, a goal, or getting somewhere, and it is so important to take time to continue to nourish connections that you have inside your business and outside your business for future opportunities or for partnerships or for just the benefit of the relationship. It's so much more about the human connection. And I think that's one of the things that I've taken away as I've grown in my career, right? When you start off, you're young and you've got to prove yourself to everybody. And, you know, I think over time you realize it's more about the people than it is about anything else.
Well, and I always try, and, you know, I know that we follow each other on LinkedIn, but you'll see that when I'm traveling, I always try to make time to either get to know the staff at a hotel or restaurant or find my friends that are in town, because those connections, it really brings me joy.
Yeah.
You know, when you can take those moments, but you have to schedule it kind of, right?
Yeah, you do. I mean, I think otherwise it's in the margins, right? Like it starts to be given up, because, oh, well, I've got to get this deck out, or we've got a board meeting we got to prep for. So it's easy to let things encroach upon things that aren't scheduled.
So I always say, make time for all those activities, those lunches and working out and family time. You got to schedule it.
You don't schedule it, it won't happen.
I think that's true. I do want to go back in time a little bit, because when I've known you, as we mentioned, we were just figuring out it's probably maybe almost 20 years. I mean, that's kind of insane. But I never really thought of it, but it's Brandon Coleman III.
It is.
And I will tell you, in my family, my nephew is Charles Hanfield Wyatt VI.
Oh, wow.
And so we have this generational, and thankfully there's been a firstborn, son always. But the third, tell me about being the third.
Being a third's awesome. I didn't get much of a choice in it, but it's been great. My grandfather was the first, Don Coleman, and he's Brandon Charles Coleman. So he's Brandon Charles Coleman, and at some point he switched to Don.
Okay.
The Don. He was actually a famous Texas high school basketball coach. So there's a Coliseum in Houston named after him. He's in the High School Hall of Fame for Texas. He did an incredible job of winning at Memorial High School. And what I learned from him is he was not easy on people. So like you go back and hear the stories there, it's not about, oh, he was just such a kind and gentle soul. What I hear is he was somebody that expected a lot from his players, and his coaching, his feedback, he held people to a higher level of accountability, and that changed people's lives. I mean, like people come to me and tell me stories still to this day about playing for my granddad. Actually, I was talking to Chris Pappas Restaurants, and he played for my granddad. And so that, I mean, it's just, there's some really cool connections. So growing up, there was kind of this
aura
of my grandfather. And then my dad, he grew up a coach's son and then went out and started his own business from scratch and created an ad agency that he sold to a firm out of New York. And so it's really interesting being the third because there's legacy that comes with that. At the same time, you want to create your own path forward. And you're thankful and grateful for all that, but you want to be your own self. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. And I'm sure that's true with everyone, but I think there's a little bit more to it when you have the name of your father or your grandfather.
I think that's an incredibly awesome story. And so did you grow up did you go to Memorial High School?
I did. I went to Memorial High School in Houston.
Okay, so I went to Westchester High School.
No way.
I did.
That's awesome.
So you guys were the rival that in Stratford. So when you said Memorial High School, I was like,
amazing.
Yeah, I was like, that's pretty awesome, crazy.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and so I grew up in Houston, and my brother played hockey, and I was an ice skater. So in Texas, and drill team, of course, the drill team. But I think what's fascinating when I listen to the story, so thank you for sharing about being the third, is I think there's something from a business perspective too, where it's a legacy that you're carrying forward. And when you think about that, just the way you were so animated talking about your grandfather and then your dad having an agency, what ideas or things about that legacy do you think you maybe inherently brought with you to your work, just carrying forward?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that I learned from my dad at a very early age. We're in the same business, initially, and now I moved on to the CEO role, but I came up through marketing. So there's a lot that I learned there, and I started in advertising in New York. And so there's a lot of lessons that I gained from him and from business that I carry with me that are just naturally part of how I operate and part of my legacy. And I think as you look at what that does for somebody, it held me to a higher standard. Like, I knew that because of my grandfather and because of my dad that I had to achieve.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe right or wrong, they'd probably say, oh, you didn't have to, but like you have to get to a certain, it's a motivating factor, I think I would say.
Well, it's also probably this idea of that goal of excellence, and I think that story even about the atomic habits, which is just that 1% better, right, to get to that goal. I think that probably also kind of weaves in. But I'm just still blown away that you grew up in Houston and went to the rival high school.
We never talk about this.
I don't know. We've never talked about where we actually went to high school. But I want to ask too, which is of course one of my favorite questions, which is when you were young, what was that first job? So it's the early job. So what was your first job back in Houston?
The very first, the first time I ever came in touch with business was a lemonade stand. And my dad made me write a P&L. So there's a video of me talking about, I had 4 quarters and I gave 2 quarters for lemons. And then obviously I couldn't pronounce quarters.
Right.
Much better at that now.
Yeah. How old were you?
I had to go back and check. I think I must have been 4 or 5, maybe.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and writing a P&L, that was interesting. So,
well, there's that connection of higher standard.
Yes. You're
like, wait a minute, you're doing a P&L when you're 4 or 5 years old. Okay, I need that video. I need that video.
I have that video, actually. I will get you that video.
I think that would be amazing. But so you did a lemonade stand, and so what else did you learn from that? So if you had your P&L, what did you learn?
I learned to watch my debt to equity ratio with my father. No, I'm just no. I think what we learned is customer service. The what it takes to earn a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
It's just starting to make it part of the conversation. Business is part of the conversation, and I think that's so valuable at a young age to really have that ability to speak business, even if it's very simply, I sold 4 lemonades. Okay, great. So you worked hard, you made people happy. There was a transaction that occurred, to balance that out, and I think
Well,
that's really
yeah, and it's showing up and it's the customer service side. And, we talked before we turned on record, but I think kids today, younger kids, and I know you have small-ish children, 5 and 9, and it's like, okay, they need their lemonade stands.
Yes.
And make the time for that. But I know if you fast forward, I married an Aggie. I know that you also went to Texas A&M.
That's true.
And I wanted to hear, you were actually more in the Greek system versus the core.
Yes, I was not in the core. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is so fascinating because my husband was not in the core either. But a legacy of people, his uncle, and so he still wears it. My husband still wears his ring, his graduation. I was like, "Do you have a ring?"
No, I don't have mine on.
But he still wears his Aggie ring. But when being in the Greek life is a different lane relative to Texas A&M.
Yes.
So tell us about, was there a moment or a lesson learned that you think might have shaped that? Because again, the core is just so big, and you chose a different path.
I chose a different path, and it's a very direct answer. It's my dad told me not to, so I did. It was that's it.
Your dad said, "Don't join a fraternity."
Do not join a fraternity. And so the first thing I did when I got to Texas A&M was I joined a fraternity. So I think that actually is a good. I like to challenge the norm a lot, and so that was my first. Hey, you're out of the house. Okay, I'm joining a fraternity because I'm in college now, and this is my choice.
I think I learned a lot about you in that one statement. Well, because it's kind of this intersection of this legacy and, the coach, the basketball, and then your dad with his own company. You're like, that's my independence.
You got to strike your own path, right? Like, I think that's the thing you have to, and then it even goes further. Like when I was graduating, my dad and I were talking about maybe starting an ad agency in College Station and recruiting marketing grads from A&M, and it just was. It's like, no, that's not my path. And so I went to New York City and worked for McCann Erickson, which was, to me, like, that's setting out on my own. It's leaving Texas and it's going out into a much bigger market, into a much bigger field. And that to me was really important. It was important to blaze my own path, especially with the name.
I think that is also so interesting too, because that idea of making your own lane also probably has helped in your massive success, because if you're coming into legacy brands, big brands, small brands, you've got to not, respect the past, but not be constrained by the past.
Absolutely.
As this changes goes.
Absolutely true.
Well, before we get into kind of current day, I did notice, and it is another topic that people don't know about. I want to hear about your ESPN little moment.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh, because I love sports. So tell me about your moment through ESPN before you landed in restaurants.
Well, it's hard to admit, but I actually owe a couple of my employments to my little brother, who was actually a NASCAR driver. So he drove for Joe Gibbs Racing, and when I was in college, he raced the 24 Hours of Daytona Rolex, and he raced some open wheel, and he was getting in NASCAR. And in one of the NASCAR races, my dad met some of the folks from ESPN, and I got connected. And I still had to interview. I wasn't like guaranteed a job, but I had to interview and, beat out other competitors for that job. But it was an incredible opportunity that was given to me because of a connection, right, of networking. And so I was just so thankful for that opportunity. Now I got in there, and one of the first things they did was ask me to write a perspective on the X Games and what my perspective of the X Games were as far as ESPN investment. And so I had probably a little bit more confidence and brashness or bravery than I probably should have at that point. But I wrote this whole dissertation on how they weren't that ESPN wasn't maximizing the X Games. So this is from I think a junior in college that wrote them.
Oh my goodness.
which, thankfully they took the right way. They said, hey, this is really interesting perspective. Let's sit down and talk about what you see that you don't think we see. So,
But I think that's so cool. The fact, again, it's that whole path of, pick your own lane, because to have that courage and confidence and a little bit of we'll call it the maverick nature of yourself, that says, you know what, let me just put it out there and not be worried about it, not be really worried about it. But I think the little brother connection's pretty good too.
Yeah. Well, we won't give them too much. We don't want to give
Not too much credit. But so when you think about, let's move forward into the restaurant world. And I know you've worked at a lot of different brands over the years, but when you think about the success, one of the most impressive things that I saw, and we'll get to each and every one of these milestones, but at Cotton Patch, you have made significant progress in black box ratings, just moving up the ranks. And I want to understand, from all these things we've talked about, what are some of those success factors that have helped just that massive movement that you've had in the last 2 years? And first of all, congratulations on that. But let's focus on that one point at first.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that. It's been a team effort. Like it's not one person, it's an entire team. And when I think about kind of what guiding forces got us there, it's clarity and vision, values and purpose. I think that's so important to know where you're going and to have everybody aligned to that. It is a consistent measurement and management and discussion around performance. So metrics are really important. We say if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So that was the second piece, is making sure that we had a really good focus on where the business stood and what was working, what wasn't. And then the third thing was an obsession really with creating value for all stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, guests, the team, and the shareholders, we have obsessed over how do we create more value. And that could come, I always look at value as, what do I get divided by what do I give up, right? And so if I'm getting more quality, more quantity, and emotional benefits as well, and I'm giving up, price, and I'm giving up time, and if I'm getting more than I'm giving up, then that's a great equation to be in.
Well, I think what's very insightful that you just said, because not everybody has it in the value equation, is time. Because what I give, it is my money, but it is also the time. But I want to just give you that specific shout out to say, if you were kind of in that 20th percentile and now you're in the 90th percentile, did I get that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. That's just mind boggling in a very short time. Let's tie it back to that airplane example.
Yes.
And when you think about just those little shifts that you made that over a couple year time period, can you be a little more specific? Like,
Absolutely.
is there something that stood out that this tiny shift made a huge difference?
Absolutely. So when I got to Cotton Patch, one of the things that we noticed first was that the brand really stood for three things. It stood for big Texas value, small town spirit, and quality scratch comfort food. And so as we looked at those three things, we kind of gave ourselves a grade on how we were performing on each of them. Value, we were failing because we had gone from one of the best value equations to one of the worst in our category. Small town spirit, we were okay on. We weren't as engaged as we should have been, but we were doing, I would say, 75%, 50 to 75%. And then quality scratch comfort food. And unfortunately, we never stepped away from that. That had always been part of Cotton Patch Café, and we had great quality scratch comfort food. As we looked at that, we said, okay, what systems, what processes do we need to put in place to build back value, to build back small town spirit, and really put that out to the team and started asking for feedback. So what small changes led to big impact? First and foremost, prioritizing feedback from the server all the way to the CFO is, tell me what you see, why, and as you ask those three whys, and then you understand where they're coming from, and then you can challenge, ask, push, redirect. And I think valuing that feedback really changed that culture in our organization.
Well, one thing I think, listening again, is you just said something super important that I want to make sure we don't gloss over, is when you said the why, and why. I think that hidden why underneath of that, it's like you don't just take the first answer to the question.
Absolutely.
You know, doing research day in and day out for clients, sometimes that first answer is the obvious one, where when you ask why 3 more times, you actually get to the root cause.
Right.
I mean, thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. And I know you see this in consumer research. It's like, it's too expensive. Well, why? Because, I'm not getting enough. Well, why aren't you getting enough? Well, because they shrunk the portion size. It's like, okay, now I'm understanding, where you're coming from. So if the portion size was bigger, would it be too expensive? No, it wouldn't be too expensive. And so then instead of changing the price, you change the portion size because now you understand the real driver behind it. Or, I think that's probably a very surface level example, but there's a lot when you start talking about, human psyche, emotion, you can get a lot deeper on those whys, and you can really start to understand your team members, your guests, in a way that you can create more value for them. And that's so much of what we focused on there.
Well, and the why, there's nothing more valuable than the feedback, and the fact that you had mentioned all 3 stakeholders. So it's the employees, the consumers, but also your internal headquarters and your shareholder. All of those all together are so critical, and they have different perspectives for sure.
Yes. And we have a red light, green light system. So no decision can be a red light for any one of those stakeholders. So you talk about specific examples. We put this system into place day one. And if an idea came up that was a green light for the guest, a green light for the team, but a red for the shareholders, you had to go back to the drawing board. And same for anything else. Green light for shareholders, red for anybody else, go back to the drawing board. And so we have to have at least a level of neutrality in every decision for one of the stakeholders, or something that's accretive or positive for that particular audience, because we should always be building value.
That is big, because there's so many decisions that are made that exclude an audience, where you probably now more people are making the decisions for the shareholders maybe versus the consumers, and unfortunately. So I think that's another probably key part. People, obviously, and I know that you have been sharing some accolades that the brand has been getting relative to the people. And obviously you had a great statistic around just the number of days the GM in stores you really have more presence for that senior leadership in the field management.
Yes.
And so what are some of the criteria or the success factors that have really enabled that transformation? Because we all know, without general managers leading the ship, it can be very problematic.
It goes sideways real fast.
Real fast.
So reducing, we call them days without a GM we call them cafe leaders. So days without a cafe leader in place. And we were actually able to reduce that by over 60%. And
in what time period?
That was actually last year's objective. So we did that all in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was really a focus on a couple of things. There's 2 different components to that. One is talent ready. So knowing our talent, knowing who's ready for that next step, who wants that next step, who's relocatable. So getting more intimate with understanding where our talent sits, 9-box ratings, and then knowing where our training sits. Have we trained them up? Are they cafe leader ready if they're an assistant cafe leader? And so that was the first part, is really understanding the talent and talent management. The second part was, can we create a better culture so we don't lose them? So if you don't lose somebody, there's no risk of an open day, right?
Right.
And so we really focused on how do we increase the benefits. So we increased benefits, and this is a brand that, when we came in, we were struggling to support our shareholders, right? But we were able to take care of our team members, build the employee benefits to a place that they were not only acceptable, but excited about. We did a great partnership with the Giving Kitchen to bring that benefit to our team members. We started adding scholarships. We just did a whole bunch of things. They were all focused on the team member that they said they wanted from us. And so that kept people enrolled. Our voluntary management turnover, meaning somebody left us, went from, I think, about 32% to about 16%. So we cut that in half, which helped us get better at not having those open days.
Well, when you think about let's connect it back to your lemonade stand, your ESPN, your charting your own way. Do you think some of those things that enabled the fact to see those opportunities, and even the atomic habits, the 1%, but what are those things that you feel like really are in your DNA that really help you get to where you are today to make these sometimes hard decisions, but sometimes fun decisions?
Yeah, so I've actually got a good story that goes along
Yeah.
with that. I actually got kicked in the mouth, metaphorically, of course. But I had come out of New York at McCann Erickson, and I'd been hired by Creed Ford and Norman Abdallah to come lead marketing for Johnny Carinos. And I was way too young to do that. But they gave me a shot. They gave me a chance that nobody else probably would or should have given me at the time, and it ended up working out long term. So, but what happened was I came in and we came up with this great campaign called the Italian Road Trip. I was just so excited. I was like, we had changed the way we were approaching them. The media buy, the offer was strong, the creative was great, and I was just ad guy all the way through, and just so confident that this was just going to blow the doors off Johnny Carinos. And so we launch it, and it was a really solid campaign. But I go into the restaurant and I sit down for lunch, and I was like, "Oh, excuse me, miss, I think I'd like to order this Italian Road Trip." And she goes, "Oh, I wouldn't do that."
Oh no.
So this is the server, front lines, and my jaw just drops, right? I'm the head of marketing for this brand, and I was like, what? Like, what? Why? And so I waited. I said, "Oh, what would you do?" And so she guided me somewhere else on the menu. And so as lunch was dying down, I said, "Excuse me, can I talk to you for a second?" She goes, "Sure." I was like, "Well, I'm the head of marketing." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And I said, No. Please, like, tell me what went wrong. Like, where did we miss? And she started talking about what it did for tips and what it did for her add-on sales and what it did to the kitchen at lunchtime, because it was like a 3-course deal. And so she gave me all the details about why it wasn't the right thing for her to sell. And that is the thing, like, getting that feedback was so important. And that's why the first thing I jumped to when you ask, like, what are some of the specifics that we put in place to improve Cotton Patch and have these results just completely turn around, it's listening. It's having empathy. Whether it's your team member giving you feedback, whether it's the guest giving you feedback, if you listen to others and you really want to hear what they think of it, then you can get to something. And that's become part of my DNA, where it wasn't maybe necessarily.
Well, and I think that transition from ad guy, you're the madman, the ad guy,
right,
to then actually having the business ownership, because those are different things.
Very different.
When I started in the advertising world, which we'll get into another day sometime, but I started there too. And it is a different accountability to own the campaign and the creative versus you rocked her world on how she had to handle that lunch, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of interesting. But when you think about the other kind of trifecta going on in the business results, so we talked about the black box, we talked about the labor and the general managers, which then all leads to great EBITDA. And so tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that goes right with the balanced stakeholder model of team, guest, shareholder. Your team is your turnovers going down, your guest is your sales and traffic going up. And then EBITDA is the result of that, right? And we have to make some decisions that are like we said, green for shareholders, but no reds for the team or the guest. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to create a 12x on EBITDA. So from where we were to today, 2 years later, we've 12x'd EBITDA.
I was going to say, let's pause on that and let that sink in. 12x EBITDA. And so I think it does say a lot of times companies will come in and just cut. Mm-hmm. But what you've done is you've managed the top line, the middle of the P&L, which then yields a great, the bottom of the P&L works out.
Well, that's 12x EBITDA with increased portion sizes, lower prices, and more benefits for team members and higher pay. We raise pay as well. So all of that, all those investments into those other shareholders, and yet we're still able to produce such incredible financial returns, which just shows that if you take a balanced approach, you really can create value for your stakeholders.
Let's just go through those again. So you increase portions, you increase benefits. Rattle those off again.
So for the guest, we increased portion sizes. Our fries went from like 6 ounces to 9 ounces. All of our side portions went up about a half an ounce. And then we lowered prices. So I think this was October of 24. We lowered base prices across the menu, which you never do in the restaurant industry.
No.
You've heard this, but it's like a big no in the restaurant industry. Don't lower prices unless you want positive traffic, and then apparently it works out. So we lowered prices, we increased portion sizes, and then we did a lot more for the guests where we created different value opportunities. And then for the team, we increased benefits, increased our average pay for our cafe leaders, introduced a profit sharing program. And then for the shareholder, obviously, the result was 12x.
So Brandon, tell me again, because you hit the green lights. It's like 3 green lights, which is phenomenal. So just let's click through those.
Yes, absolutely. So the first one is the team. And that was the most important one, is to build value for the team. And we've increased our benefits. We've increased our average pay. We've we've added scholarships. We've added an emergency fund for team members who face trials, in their personal life. We've done a lot for the team. The second one was the guest. And we've increased portion sizes. We went from 6 ounces of fries to 9 ounces of fries, which is a big step change. We've actually increased the size of our scoops, right? Like so that we've more portions for the green beans and mashed potatoes and things like that. We also lowered prices, which you don't do in the restaurant.
Like, who does that, Brandon?
Who does that? But going against that, just, time-held tradition of never lowering prices, again, diverging, and it results in positive traffic. And so now, we've got 12x in EBITDA, and we're on this gravy-fueled rocket ship.
Gravy-fueled rocket ship. I love that. That's amazing. But it's so well-deserved, Brandon, and I feel like all of the things that we have talked about really have set you up for this moment. I mean, you've had tremendous success in all the other places that you've worked, but to see the success you're having now at Cotton Patch Café is remarkable. So congratulations. Very well deserved. And I like your little pivots and mapping your own lanes.
Absolutely.
Well, and one of our traditions is I like to do the lightning round. So what I have these 3 cards.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you to draw a card, and then I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see here.
All right. Very good. Let's see what it says. So what I want to ask you is talk about a place that holds special meaning for you.
A place
that holds special meaning for you.
Oh, man. I am actually going to go with New York City.
I love New York.
I love New York. My grandmother grew up in the Bronx. There's like a long history there with her family, Irish family. But my dad took me there when I was younger, like in high school. He took our family there for Christmas. And then to have an internship at ESPN and then at McCann, and that resulted in a job at McCann. It was such an influential time of my life. There's so much going on, so much energy, so much excitement, and everybody's hustling. And I think that really set the tone for my career. I averaged 78 hours a week my first year at McCann Erickson. So actually, there was a class action lawsuit because we made less than minimum wage when you took our our hours, and it was across the industry. Everybody in ad agency.
I started an ad agency too, and it's when you're the young person right out of college in advertising, you work a lot of hours.
But I think what it taught me is, number one, that work ethic and that commitment. But I think largely that the place that's special is New York. I have had so many great memories. My wife and I have gone back there many a times. I can't wait to take my kids there. But it's just such an energetic place, such a special place with so many people from so many different walks of life. I think New York would be my special place.
It's amazing. And the heartbeat of New York is just so special in of itself.
It is.
But our other tradition is I have our journal, our Joy Journal. And part of our tradition is a guest will write a question. Okay. So the person I interviewed last time has a question that I'm going to read.
Uh-oh.
And it's a good one.
Okay.
And I actually think you know this person. So, are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
So here's our joy journal. Is if you were to teach a college class, what would it be?
Teach a college class. What would it be? There was a wine tasting class at my college. No, that wouldn't be what I taught.
I think that would be a good one.
I don't know that this class exists. Can I make up a class?
Of course you can.
Um,
You're creating your lane again.
I would there. Don't follow the rules. Just break all of them. I would say on ownership and accountability. I think there's so much, and we didn't even touch on the cultural piece, but just when you get into feedback and you start asking for ownership and you ask for accountability and you give that trust to people, that creates such a step change in the culture, and it can really have a huge impact on business. And I think that it's really had a tremendous impact on my life, just ownership and accountability. And it comes up through, business training. It comes up in my personal life. It's just so powerful to take ownership of every situation, even if it's not one you necessarily want to be in. But if you choose ownership of it, it's so empowering to then make that next choice.
I think that would be an incredible course for colleges. And here's why. Is it, entrepreneur classes, AI classes, technology classes. But I think in the world of Gen Z today, that idea of ownership and accountability is, I don't want to say a lost skill because it's not, but it's maybe forgotten. It's not as front and center as it needs to be, which goes back to that lemonade stand when you were 4 or 5 years old.
Yes, it does. Bring it full circle.
It just always goes back to that full circle. But I think that would be a brilliant class. I'll have to connect you to some of my people in higher ed, and
awesome.
Who knows, maybe we could do that class. And then the last thing is I would love for you to write a question for my next guest.
Okay.
And so you can just fill that in right here.
Awesome. All right, this is a doozy.
All right, I cannot wait. All right, Brandon, thank you. It was such a joy, and keep doing all the great things that you're doing.
Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Congratulations on all your success.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. The Business of Joy. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Lisa Miller. In growth, it doesn't come from more data. It comes from understanding people. It's translating human truth into the business outcomes. I work with leaders to close the gap between what consumers feel and what companies need to do. It's turning emotional insights into strategic advantages. It's the clarity that you need to drive growth. If that sounds interesting, let's connect. You can reach me at lisa@lwm-associates.com or on LinkedIn, Lisa W. Miller. And remember, joy is a choice we make and a business we build, so keep investing in joy.